In this lecture of IAS 19, Employee Benefits, we are going to cover the first type of employee benefits, which is short-term benefits. Now, when you talk about the short-term employee benefits, let's first start off with the definition of these benefits. This is a benefit to be provided within a year of service, or we can say within 12 months from the year of service. Year of service is very important. Why? Because the time period in which an employee is performing the service, he or she is going to get a compensation against that, a benefit against that. So if that benefit is falling within 1 year or within 12 months from the date of that service, that is going to be called a short-term employee benefit. Now, this is other than the termination benefit. So in the regular course of employment, if the benefit is being given, that is going to be called a short-term employee benefit. There are different examples of it. We can see over here, salary, any short-term bonus, commission, any kind of in-kind benefits or perks, short-term paid benefits, all of them are going to be included within the scope of short-term employee benefits. This is normally the most common type of employee benefits that is provided within a company. So its accounting treatment is important for you. Now, once again, please remember all of these items that we discussed over here. If an employee is getting them within 12 months from the period of service, only then it is going to be called an employee benefit. So all kinds of wages, salaries, any kind of social security contributions, so much so that we will talk about the paid absences or holidays also, any kind of even the profit sharing or bonuses, any non-monetary kind of benefits that we mentioned over here, for example, private medical care, company cars, housing, etc. All of them are going to fall under the scope of short-term employee benefits. Now, in case of short-term employee benefits, normally speaking, with respect to salary also, our basic understanding is that the double entry is straightforward. You debit the expense and credit is made to cash or payable, depending upon whether the benefit is being paid in cash or at the time of recording of it, it is going to be paid in future. Now, this double entry is very importantly passed at the time of service. This is a very important part of IAS 19, that the expense is recorded when the work is performed, not when actually the cash is paid. So in this case also, you have to make sure that in case of short-term employee benefits, the expense is recognized in the time period in which the employee is providing the service. Only then it is going to be proper accounting for the short-term employee benefits. Now, in case of short-term employee benefits, we have another very important benefit, that is short-term paid holidays. In this case, it is divided into 3 different categories. No compensation, no accounting. This is the first part. So, where there are companies in which case, if the paid holidays are given and in the current year, the employee did not use them in full, and in the future there is not going to be any compensation against it, then you don't have to pass any double entry for it. But on the other hand, if you have a compensation in the form of cash for the short-term paid holidays, then you have to do its accounting. Similarly, in case of carry forward or accumulated holidays, that is also going to be accounted for properly. This is the case where at times the companies give you an option that if you don't avail your leave quota completely in the current year, then that amount or those number of days are going to be carried forward to next year and they are going to be added to your leave quota for the next year. Now, from an accounting point of view, we have to see how it is going to be accounted for in our financial statements. Now, for short-term paid holidays, the method of accounting that is used is accrual basis of accounting. Just a quick reminder, you have already covered the accruals concept in your previous subjects. Accruals concept basically means that expense or income is recognized when it is actually incurred, not when cash is received or paid. Now, in case of employee benefits, because we are talking about the expense of a company, so we are going to see that the expense, which in this case is employee benefit, it should be recognized in the period in which it is incurred, not when actually the cash is paid. Then, in this case, they say that if the compensation is in the form of cash or the unconsumed holidays are going to be paid in the next year, it's the same thing. So in this case, you have to pass this double entry in the current year in which the employee is performing the work. Now, compensation in the form of cash, once again, this cash is going to be paid to the employee after the year end. So for example, in the current year, you were allocated a leave quota of 20 leaves. The employee availed only 18 leaves out of that. For the 2 days that are left, the employee is going to be given cash, but that cash is definitely going to be given next year when the company is sure that the employee is no longer going to avail those holidays. When you say that it is going to be paid next year, it means that it is going to be paid within 1 year from the time period in which the service is being performed. So automatically it is going to fall under the criteria of short-term paid holidays. Now the next thing over here is that when you know that this is going to be the case, then the double entry is passed at the year end, that is debit expense. This is the amount that is going to be compensated to the employees, and credit is going to be to the expense payable. Later on in our lecture, we will see how the calculation of this amount is also done. But for now, please keep this in mind that the expense is going to be recognized immediately. So when an employee is performing the task, he is not only paid for the days for which he is coming into the office, but also for the days for which we provided them the option of either availing a paid holiday or getting a compensation against it. Then, when we talk about the carry forward holidays, once again, you have to see that how many holidays have been carried forward to the next year. In this case, the number of holidays expected to be consumed in the next year, you have to calculate that, and once again, the expense has to be recognized accordingly. Again, the purpose is that the employee worked in your business in the current year. He or she became eligible for these employees because of the work that they had performed in the current year. So the relevant expense should also be recognized on accrual basis in the current year. In this case also, once again, debit expense by the amount that is calculated and credit to the expense payable account that is going to be paid in the next year in future. So either it is going to be paid, or against that the employee is going to avail a benefit and take holidays. Now please understand this concept over here, that if a company had 320 normal working days other than the weekend, and in this they allowed the employee to have, let's suppose, 15 annual leaves and for example 10 casual or sick leaves. So basically the company is allowing the employee to work for 295 days only but get compensation for 320 days. Now in this case, when you are going to recognize the expense, you have to make sure that you had already committed that even if the employee does not come into the business for these 25 days, he or she is going to be compensated for it. So that is the concept over here, which is why we pass this double entry debit expense, credit expense payable in this regard. Now let's solve a question in this case for a better understanding of this concept. In this example, we can see that the annual salary expense of a company is 12 million. This is annual salary expense of all the employees. So for a whole year, the salary of all the employees. The number of employees mentioned over here are 300. The annual working days of this company are 250. The question says that the number of unconsumed holidays is 4 per employee at the year end. 10% employees will leave without taking their entitlement of unconsumed holidays in the next year. Now, at the current year end, you have to judge that what is going to be liability in the current year. As I mentioned over here, because these leaves relate to the current accounting period, the employees have performed their services in the current accounting period. So the relevant expense also needs to be accounted for in the current accounting period. The amount, however, is going to be calculated on the data that we estimate for the next year. Now, in this case, we have to identify what is going to be the expense that is going to be related to the current year, but for which the benefit is going to be paid to the employee in the next year. Now, let's start off with, first of all, what is the per employee salary of this company? So, the per employee salary we can see over here is 12 million, which is for all the employees, divided by the number of employees in this case, which is 300. So you divide 12 million by 300. It gives you the per employee salary of 40,000 per annum. Please remember, this is per annum salary. Now, in this case, you have to identify that what is the per day salary per employee. Now, because you have the data for the whole year, now you can distribute it with respect to the working days. So, per employee, per day salary over here is $40,000 divided by 250 active days. So that is going to be $160 per day. Now, because of this calculation, you can identify the amount that is allocated to per day per employee, for which the compensation is going to be given in the next year. Such kind of questions have come up in your past exam papers, so please notice the calculation very clearly. Now, once you have done this calculation of per day salary, now you have to calculate the amount for which you have to recognize your expense as well as the liability. As we covered in the previous slide, debit expense, credit liability working is going to be done. Now, when you recognize this liability, now you know that overall there are 300 employees. So this is the number of total employees at the current year end. Now please see, this working is going to be done at the year end. Why? Because during the year you wait for the employees to consume their holidays. Only the unconsumed holidays are going to be carried forward in the next year or provided compensation against. Now 300 is the total number of employees. The question, however, is telling us 10% employees going to leave in the next year without taking benefit of their unconsumed holidays. Naturally speaking, this benefit is only available if they are still there to consume it. So only 90% of the existing employees are going to avail this benefit. Now over here you can see that the number of holidays per employee is 4. So number of unconsumed holidays over here is 4, and we calculated ourselves that the amount that we can allocate it to per day of each employee. So per day salary of each employee is 160. Now after that you calculate the total amount, that is 172,800. Now with this amount you are going to pass this double entry, which is debit expense, credit expense payable in the future. So this is the working for short-term paid holidays. As I mentioned, straightforward, such questions have come up in the past exam papers also. So you should know that a stepwise approach needs to be taken, in which first of all you calculate the per employee salary, then you calculate the per employee per day salary, and then you calculate the estimated number of employees and number of days that are going to be there in the next year consumed, and you multiply it with the per day salary to get the final amount of expense. The double entry you have already seen. So this is the accounting treatment of short-term benefits. Now over here, as we mentioned in the very beginning, that whether you're talking about salary or you're talking about any kind of bonus or commission, all of these are going to be accounted for under IAS 19, the accounting treatment of short-term employee benefits. Now one last point that you have to remember over here is with respect to this short-term bonus also. Please remember that when you talk about employee benefits, they can arise either through a legal obligation or a formal contract, or they can arise through a constructive obligation also, such like any such repetitive behavior in the past as well. In this case also, at the year end, you have to calculate the estimate. So a reliable estimate of the amount of bonuses has to be calculated and the double entry has to be passed. This is an area that you might face in your questions with respect that the question says that the employees are going to get a percentage of profit as a bonus, or the directors are going to get a percentage of profit as a bonus for the current year. Now the question that arises is that the profit is going to be calculated once the year ends, and after that the complete working is done. So should we pass the double entry for bonus in the current period or in the next period? As the standard says, that bonus related to the working of the employees in the current accounting period. So at the year end, their bonuses should also be recognized as an expense in the current accounting period. If they are going to be paid in future, you pass the credit entry to the payable, but definitely the debit expense is going to be passed in the same accounting period related to which the bonus is being given. So this is all with the working of your short-term employee benefits. Thank you.